Let's get ready to rumble. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. All right, guys, happy Tuesday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. Welcome back, guys. I hope you had a great Monday. We have a little bit of a snowstorm here in Massachusetts, although it really just started sticking where I live. But I think if you're in central Massachusetts, you definitely already got a couple of inches. But yeah, they canceled school today. Apparently, they canceled it last night, or they announced it last night that it'll be canceled today. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, it's just raining. And it was just raining for hours. But now the snow is coming. But for those of us on Eastern Massachusetts, like, the kids could have gone to school today. They could have gone to school, but it is what it is. I'm going to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. I do have a big announcement at the end of the show tonight, so don't miss that. I think you're going to be happy to hear that. What's going on? CBC Voter says, happy Tuesday. Shout out to Hannah G. Thanks for talking about the Willow project, Sabby. You are welcome. We are going to get into that tonight. Shout out to Anon user, drill baby drill, not just for GOPers anymore. You are correct. Shout out to Ben, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Tuesday, Sabby. Greetings, Mark says, Sabby, I wanted to say about DSA failure in Nevada. The whole Nevada DSA should publicly announce they're joining workers' strike back immediately. I agree. That would be a great announcement. What's going on? Dabby Dab says, Sabby fam, whoop, whoop, Sabby time. Don't forget to show the like button some love. Shout out to Joe says, when bankers get bailed out every 8 years, the capitalistic failure is not sustainable. In the Fed and reinstate Glass-Steagall. Join a member-owned credit union. Shout out to Corey, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Tuesday, Sabby fam. Greetings, Lorez says, hola, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Another bank crash. Capitalism. Help Sabby by watching the ads and smashing that like. Go ahead and start us off right and hit the like, guys. That helps me out with the algorithm. Shout out to Gamer says, hello. What is going on? Soul says, happy Tuesday evening, everyone. Believe nothing on mainstream media. Banks failing. Twitter files is a controlled demolition. Shout out to Screen Art says, twisting one up now. I don't know what that's about, but what's up? What's going on? Mastermind Hour says, my day just got a little bit better. Thank you. I appreciate that. What's going on? Bad Cookie says, sup, hit the thumbs on your way in. Greetings, Randy says, good snowed in evening from Central New York, comrades. Oh, you're in Central New York. I've driven through that way. Shout out to, that's right, guys. There is more to New York State besides New York City. Shout out to Melody says, keep up the good work. Thanks so much. Greetings, Sakudo says, what's good, y'all? What's going on? Oz says, not sure I'm as lefty as much as I am done with electoral politics. Eric Red, hope all is well. Shout out to Eric, who's a Sabby member, says 10 inches here. Yeah, so where Eric lives in Massachusetts, like, they got a lot of snow. Shout out to Kim says, hi, Gamer, and hi, Oz. You guys got some love in the chat. Greetings, Mario says SA will be at Grand Park tomorrow for the LA teachers strike rally. I think it means socialist alternative. So definitely check that out if you're in the LA area. Greetings, Carrie says Soul. Okay. Soul, you're loved in the chat too. People love you guys. Shout out to Christian says, hey, Sabby, love and solidarity. Greetings, Chris says, I live in central New York State. 2 of you. We got hit with damn near close to 2 feet. I hate winter. Yeah. See, because they're not on the coast, like people that are in like Albany and Buffalo and Syracuse, like they get a lot of snow. New York City, not so much. Shout out to Night of the Sun, bro. The only people Briahna Joy Gray is squaring with are the true left and Palestinians. I'm not sure how to take that. Shout out to Nolan says, howdy, comrades. Okay, greetings, Chris Allegri says, hello. And let's go ahead and get started, guys. So I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Again, you help us keep the lights on around here. Thank you so much to Sabby patrons. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. And I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's go ahead and give it up for Jody Brown. Thank you guys so much for your support. Okay, we have some interesting stories to talk about tonight. Joe Biden is a part of 2 of them. It just worked out that way. But let's go ahead and share that thumbnail to show you what we are going to discuss tonight. Tonight, we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray and Khanna square off. Yes, there's different topics that were discussed during that interview, but there's one topic in particular that I do want to focus on because I feel like Khanna just I feel like Khanna was just being Khanna. Like his answer didn't make any sense, in my opinion. We're also going to discuss Joe Biden climate fail. This has to do with the Willow project in Alaska. If you have not heard about that, you're going to hear about it tonight. It is very concerning. We're also going to discuss Plaskett's Epstein money. Yes, if she looks familiar to you, this was the woman who interrogated Matt Taibbi, and she repeatedly asked him for his sources, so to speak, even though she said she didn't ask for the sources. Well, there is something that has come out about her that I did not know about. So we're going to get into that. And last but not least, we are going to discuss Signature Bank closing. So we did discuss Silicon Valley Bank the other day. There is another bank that has closed, and this is Signature Bank. So we're going to discuss that one tonight. But let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Get comfy, get some popcorn, some tea, all that jazz. Water, a beer, whatever makes you feel comfy. We are going to get started with this story about Signature Bank. Now, Joe Biden did issue a statement about this bank closing because this was another larger bank. I guess he felt like he had to come out and speak now because we had Silicon Valley Bank and now we have Signature Bank. I'm going to play his statement. And then we're going to get into what could have caused this to happen to this particular bank and other comments as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this speech here from Crime Bill Joe.
Bank. Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills. And their hardworking employees can breathe easier as well. Last week, when we learned of the problems of the banks and the impact they could have on jobs of small businesses and banking system overall.
So I just want to reiterate here. The first thing that he says to you is that the banking system is safe. And we don't have evidence of this yet, but I am getting '08 vibes. I told you guys a couple days ago, I'm a little anxious, more so than usual, a little antsy because I feel like I'm having deja vu. I remember hearing these types of statements during the '08 housing crisis that we were going to be okay. Don't worry. And then there was like this domino effect where multiple banks were affected. So if you remember earlier on, Robert Reich did explain, I think it was 2 streams ago, he said that, oh, this is just this one bank. This is not going to be a domino effect. And here we are. More banks are closing. So I'm getting anxious. I don't know.
I instructed my team to act quickly to protect these interests. They've done that. They've done that. On Friday, the government regulator in charge, the FDIC, took control of Silicon Valley Bank's assets. And over the weekend, it took control of Signature Bank's assets. Treasury Secretary Yellen and a team of banking regulators have taken action, immediate action. And here are the highlights. First, all customers who had deposits in these banks can rest assured, rest assured they'll be protected and they'll have access to their money as of today.
Let's remember that. Let's hold him to that.
That includes small businesses across the country that bank there and need to make payroll, pay their bills, and stay open for business. No losses will, and this is an important point, no losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Let me repeat that. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks pay into the deposit insurance fund.
They keep repeating this statement. Khanna made this statement as well. No money's going to come from taxpayers. Don't worry, guys. It shouldn't have to come from us regardless. Like, why do they keep, like, that's the part that's, I don't know. It's unsettling to me that they keep feeling the need to say that. It should never have to come from the taxpayers. This isn't our fault. We had nothing to do with this, but they keep repeating that.
Because of the actions that our regulators have already taken, every American should feel confident that their deposits will be there if and when they need them. Second, the management of these banks will be fired. If the bank is taken over by FDIC, the people running the bank should not work there anymore. Third, investors in the banks will not be protected. They knowingly took a risk, and when the risk didn't pay off, investors lose their money.
We'll see. Let's see if that actually holds. So he's telling you that the managers of those banks will be fired and the investors will also be held accountable. We will see, because again, like I said before, in '08, they were not held accountable, but hopefully this is done the correct way this time.
That's how capitalism works. And fourth, there are important questions of how these banks got into the circumstance in the first place. We must get the full accounting of what happened and why those responsible can be held accountable.
So let me get this straight. He said we must get the full story of how this happened in the first place. This is very concerning because you are addressing the American people in this mini press conference and you're telling them what the accountability is going to be for those that were involved, but you don't know how it happened. There are several economists that are very well versed in this. I had someone on recently, Peter from Philly, to talk about public banks. And I asked him, like, how did this come to be with Silicon Valley Bank? And Peter seemed to understand how it happened. So it's kind of concerning that you have the president of the United States here that's telling people, don't worry, your money's going to be safe. You're going to be okay. You can trust the banking system, but you're also telling us that you don't know what caused this to happen. And to me, that's short-sighted on his part.
In my administration, no one is above the law. And finally, we must reduce the risks of this happening again. During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank.
And during the Obama and Biden administration, we had to deal with the housing crisis. And you guys decided to bail out the banks instead of bailing out the American people. I'm adding that part in there because he's going to leave that part out.
Including the Dodd-Frank law to make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements. I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely this kind of bank failure would happen again.
Okay, this piece right here, he said the last administration, which was Trump's administration, rolled back some of those laws that they had in place. This is the same statement that Pete Buttigieg is giving about the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. He said, well, the Trump administration, they rolled back those. Okay, but here's my thing. When Joe Biden took office, you knew that those rollbacks already existed. So you should have went ahead and made those changes then. The Democratic Party has a tendency to be reactive instead of proactive. What's being proactive? I just won a presidency. There were certain laws that were rolled back and restrictions that were rolled back by the previous administration. Let me go ahead and reverse that and fix that. That's being proactive. Being reactive is when you wait until a disaster happens and then you say, oh, whoops, we better put those policies back in place to protect, the people, to protect the banking system, to protect the train system so that this doesn't happen again. This is a common problem that I've noticed with the Democratic Party. They did the same thing in reference to Roe v. Wade, being overturned by the Supreme Court. They had plenty of time, decades, to codify Roe v. Wade into law. They chose not to do it. They chose not to even bring this up again as an issue until the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And this has been a common issue with the Democratic Party. They are reactive. They are not proactive. That is something that they need to change.
And to protect American jobs and small businesses. Look, the bottom line is this. Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this. We'll do whatever is needed.
The banking system is safe, but we don't know how this happened. Guys, word of advice here. Word of advice. If I were you, make sure you have some money stashed aside. Make sure you have, if you have to go to the bank tomorrow and take whatever you can, a couple $100s out, whatever you can, and just put that aside in a safe space, I recommend that you do that. This is something my dad always tried to warn me about. Always have cash on hand in the event that something like this happened.
On top of all that, let's also take a look at a moment to put the situation in a broader context. We've made strong economic progress in the past 2 years. We've created more than 12 million new jobs, more jobs in 2 years than any president has ever created in a single 4-year term.
And yet you still have an increased homelessness population in this country. Despite that, you never explained what these jobs were, if they were full-time, if they were temp, if they were contract positions, if these jobs offered benefits for people, including health benefits. This also has nothing to do with these banks closing. Thousands of people have been laid off by the tech industry before these banks started to close. So what this is Joe Biden trying to come in and comfort you in such a sense to make you, to calm your nerves so that you're not concerned. Just to remind you, let me remind you what our administration did. Nobody's really thinking about that right now if they can't get to their money. If you're one of these people and you had accounts at these banks, you're not thinking about, oh, well, the Biden administration created all these jobs. No, you're thinking about, how can I get to my money? When are you going to give me my money? What's happening with these banks? That's what you're going to be focused on. But this is him trying to sell his administration again, trying to sell and say, this is the success that we've had. People don't want to hear that right now.
Unemployment is below 4% for 14 straight months.
Because you kicked people off of unemployment. You kicked millions of people off of unemployment. Him and Pramila Jayapal continue to leave that out.
Take-home pay for workers is going up, especially for lower and middle-income workers. And we've seen record numbers of people apply to start new businesses, more than 10 million of them. More than 10 million applications over the last 2 years starting businesses. Now we need to keep this progress going. That's what swift action that my administration over the past few years is all about. Protecting depositors, protecting the banking system, protecting the economic gains we've made together for the American people.
If you were protecting the depositors, they wouldn't be in this situation to begin with.
Thank you. God bless you. And may God protect our troops. See you in California.
Mr. President.
What does the troops have to do with, you see, this is something that politicians tend to do. I don't know what this is. God bless our troops. This conversation has nothing to do with the military. It has nothing to do with war, anything like that. This is particularly about these banks closing. And he wants to bring in the whole patriotic stance. God protect our troops. There is a movie called Head of State with Chris Rock. If you haven't seen it, you should watch that movie. It's really funny. Because there are certain things that they point to in that movie, making fun of politicians, that there are certain things that politicians say that are just ridiculous. And one of the statements you hear over and over again in that movie is, God bless America and no place else, from one of the candidates. He says it over and over, even when it's not even relevant. So this is an example of a politician saying something that is not relevant at this point in time, has nothing to do with the conversation. God bless our troops. Joe Biden is not with it.
What do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Do you see what's happening here? This is the president of our country. It's just like quick stage left, exit very quickly. Look, they're asking. He didn't stay for any type of questions because you know why? They probably told Joe Biden, don't answer any questions because he's still experiencing some type of cognitive decline. Watch how him exit. Watch this.
For the American people. Thank you. God bless you. And may God protect our troops. See you in California.
Mr. President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Should all depositors be protected at all banks? All right, thank you, everybody. In-town travel pool.
Like, the banks are safe. Let me exit now. That's what this is about. Like, it's just, it's embarrassing. It really is. When you have a banking situation that's happening in this country, the response shouldn't be, okay, bye. Now let's get into the situation a little bit more closely about Signature Bank, because this has become a domino effect. So I do have a clip here that I want to show, and it says emergency move to avert banking crisis. So they've already identified it as a crisis, and he's telling you, you have nothing to worry about. Let's go in.
This morning, the government is deploying emergency measures to stop a potential banking crisis, including the takeover of another regional bank, Signature Bank of New York, just 2 days after regulators shut down Silicon Valley Bank, the second largest bank failure in U.S. history.
I think that without this, there could have been some serious runs on other banks because there would have been a loss of confidence throughout the whole system.
The Federal Reserve.
Second largest, guys. Second largest. So now they're going to get into the piece about the Federal Reserve.
Last night announced clients at both banks will get access to all their funds when branches open today, not just the $250,000 insured by the FDIC. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen insists this is not a bailout because the funds are coming from a pool of money paid into by Wall Street, different than.
They feel the need to say that it's not a bailout because they already see the blowback that they're getting from people, especially on social media, about bailing out the banks.
the taxpayer-funded bailouts of 2008.
This is not a bailout. This is change of policy, yes, but the FDIC's funding does not come from taxpayers. It comes from the banks, the big banks.
See, there they go again with the word taxpayers. We're not using your taxpayer money to save these banks. You know how they continue to say this? Because they know the blowback that they got from people from 2008.
Banks.
All the turmoil began last Wednesday when Silicon Valley Bank, a large lender in the tech industry, tried to sell assets to boost its balance sheet. That panicked investors, and customers raced to withdraw their money after seeing the news on social media.
It's a confidence game, and social media can destroy confidence very quickly. Twitter.
Why would you be confident if your bank just closed? That statement didn't even make any sense. It's a confidence game, and social media can hurt confidence. So can a closed bank. Like, why would you be confident if you can't access your funds?
It was just ablaze with concerns about what was going on here. And that creates a wildfire situation.
Senator Bernie Sanders blames Silicon Valley Bank's collapse on successful Republican efforts in recent years to relax regulations on small and medium-sized banks. As for Signature Bank, the reason for its collapse remained unclear overnight. Many of Signature's clients are in cryptocurrency.
And I want to bring up this point. So now they're bringing up the issue about crypto again. And we saw what happened with FTX. By the way, there is a connection with FTX and Signature Bank. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But again, I feel like they're trying to push the need to regulate crypto, especially after the collapse of FTX. Notice they said the statement there from Bernie Sanders. He said this is because of Republicans. The previous administration is the reason why we're in this situation, because they pulled back some of the regulations. But again, like I said, when Joe Biden took office, he could have put those regulations back in place, and he decided not to. He decided to wait until something happened. And now it's like, okay, let's go back and fix that. Again, the Democratic Party is reactive, not proactive.
Over the weekend, the uncertainty spread to another regional bank, First Republic, because of its similar profile to Silicon Valley. Many customers concerned.
Trying to figure out if this is the best place to hold our money.
But overnight, First Republic said it secured funding from JP Chase and the Federal Reserve.
We got to pause there when they say JP Chase, because this isn't the first time where JP has had to, or they've intervened to help another bank. Although when this happened, like in 1914, 1919, when it happened back then, JP actually stepped in to save the federal government. And by doing so, they actually acquired those banks that had failed. They didn't save them. They bought them out, so to speak. That's one of the reasons why JP grew the way that it did. But again, this points to the particular point that we are too connected to the central banking system. The fact that these banks, these regional banks, have to be rescued by these central banks is problematic. And that goes to show you just how much power JP has. And this is going to come up later on in the show, because there's something else I need to mention about JP that connects to another story. But this is a very, very powerful bank. You have to understand that the central banking system is more powerful than the president of the United States. The president more so is a puppet, so to speak. These central banking systems, they have more power. So you have to keep your eye on them.
Meantime, experts say the emergency program announced by the Fed should be enough to calm financial markets and prevent a domino effect.
Each case is different. I don't think this is anything like 2008. I don't think we have to worry about that. We don't have contagion in the financial system itself.
They mentioned 3 banks. How many banks do you need to have a domino? That's 3 dominoes. Maybe they need a couple more banks to declare it as a domino effect.
JP Chase and PNC are among the banks reportedly in talks to acquire Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley has drawn criticism for reportedly paying bonuses to employees just hours before the bank was seized by the government.
What I tell you, they're going to acquire those banks. At least Silicon Valley Bank. JP is going to swallow that up, basically. This people ask me like why I talk about the bank so much, because I'm sorry, but this is a serious issue. You have to pay attention to them because they really do control the way things operate in this country, not the president of the United States. Now, there was a connection to Signature Bank and FTX, and this is something that came my way. Signature Bank was sued last month for allegedly helping FTX commingle customer funds with Alameda's trading accounts. The bank was taken over by regulators today, and so you'll see the screenshot here. Signature Bank sued for substantially facilitating FTX commingling. Signature knew of and permitted the commingling of FTX customer funds within its proprietary blockchain-based payments network, Signet. That's according to the court filing. So we really do have to focus on what's happening here with crypto and these banks. Look at what has happened over the past couple of months. First, FTX collapse. That was huge. Then you have Silicon Valley Bank collapse. Then you have Signature Bank collapse. They also mentioned in that clip First Republic Bank. But I think First Republic, it sounds like they'll be able to bounce back a little bit better. But I really do think, because of what has happened over the past couple of months, I really do think they are going to try to find a way to regulate crypto. I really do. Hey, if I'm wrong, I'll come back and I'll eat my words, but I have a feeling I'm not going to be wrong on that. I'll take that comment on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. You know what I think? This is what Jay-Z meant by he never heard the word capitalism. Before Bernie, both parties were not making a concerted effort to say capitalism because socialism, its opposite, was suppressed. Like a fish not recognizing that it's in water, it was already baked into the system. So why does Joe say capitalism works? It sounds like he's scared we're losing confidence in it. He does. I think he does know that people are losing confidence in, the capitalist system, especially when you look at the legislation that just passed recently, where you even had so-called progressives like Ro Khanna voting to denounce socialism. I think they know what's coming. I think they know. Kim says, I believe Plaskett was appointed to her position. No voting needed. Yeah, we're about to get into her. Scott says, it's not a crash. It's an opportunity. Dana, I closed my account at Bank of America during the Occupy Wall Street's Move Your Money campaign. I joined a credit union. Yeah, this is something that my parents have tried to push for a long time, is to join credit unions instead. JB says, hey, Sabby. Hey, everyone. Forehead kisses. Robert says, no matter where the bailout money comes from, it's sucking up from us to the oligarchs. That is the only thing to remember. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Speaking of money, you remember the woman, Congresswoman Plaskett? She was one of the people that interrogated Matt Taibbi. She called him a so-called journalist. She also went on to ask him who gave him access to those emails. And then she said that she was not asking for a source. I'm going to play that clip from Orf because he actually made a clip for that. And it's actually really, really funny. And then I'm going to get into the story that just came out about her recently and why I question why she was even allowed to be a part of that committee, given the information that has come out about her. You can't talk about integrity when you see what she did. But I want to play this clip for those of you who did not see. This is really funny. So Orf, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Orf made this clip. He's done a lot of clips before. You've probably seen his clips on other like lefty independent media outlets. He's really good at this. But he made one for the subcommittee hearing about the Twitter files. In reference to Congresswoman Plaskett, you have to see this, and then we'll get into the story about her.
Who gave you access to these emails?
Are you trying to get journalists?
No, I'm not trying to
their
get,
sources?
no. Who gave you access to these emails? I'm not asking you your source. I'm asking you, who gave you access to these emails? I
That
never
doesn't
asked them
raise-
for their sources. Who gave you access to these emails? You are not going to say
I would
I've
yield
asked
back
for
to- I would,
sources. Who gave you access to these emails? I
did,
did
and
not
we-
ask for sources.
what?
Who gave you access to these emails? I did not ask you who those sources were. Who gave you access to these emails? For the record,
From Wyoming
keep the
is
record correct.
recognized.
Who gave you access to these emails?
Again, Congressman, with
Thank
respect,
you.
you asked me who gave me who gave.
I asked you who gave it to you.
The ranking member of the Committee on the Weaponization of Government is asking for your sources.
I'm not. I am
It sounds
asking
like it.
who gave you access to these emails.
No, that's a question
Because
of
you
sources.
earlier said
Congressman,
that
you're
we
asking me
say
to
yes or
you're
no.
asking a journalist to reveal a
So then you-
source.
This is a false narrative. We're engaging in false narratives.
I
Well,
just
it
can't answer
either
your
is or
question.
he-
Gentlelady is
because
not
he's
recognized.
interrupted.
Gentlelady is not
Chairman,
You're
recognized.
not recognizing my
He has not said that. What he has said is he's not going to reveal his source, and the fact that Democrats are pressuring him to do so is such a
We're not.
violation.
We're asking him about his
I
conversation.
do think it's worth pointing out that I have co-sponsored, I think some of my colleagues have co-sponsored the SHIELD Act in previous Congresses with Democrats to protect what we see them trying to do today. Protect journalists from having to reveal their sources to government. That used to be a shared position in the Congress. Unfortunately, as we're seeing now, it's not the position anymore.
Who gave you access to these emails? I
That
never
doesn't
asked them
raise-
for their sources. We are going to tell the truth.
All right, shout out to Orr for that video. I'm sorry, that was hilarious. But Congresswoman Plaskett is actually in the news for other reasons, and she was actually brought to people's attention because of that subcommittee hearing and the statements that she made. And people kind of dug into some information about her that I was not aware of, and people are starting to question if she was even, or if it was even, I don't want to say a good idea, if it was even right to have her be a part of that committee. And I'm going to show you why. Because it appears that Congresswoman Plaskett is unlikely to return contribution from accused child molester Jeffrey Epstein. Yes. So she actually had a connection to Jeffrey Epstein. I kid you not. Let's go on. This article apparently came out in 2019. I never saw it. I never heard about this until now. So there she is. So let's get into it. Wealthy political financier and accused child. I got to be careful what I say on here. Think about that now. Jeffrey Epstein contributed directly to Democratic Representative Stacey Plaskett's last two campaigns for Congress. So FYI, sometimes donors, they may contribute through a PAC. This was not through a PAC. This was direct contributions from Epstein. The U.S. Virgin Islands lawmaker has decided she will be keeping the cash, even after Epstein's arrest in New York, at least for now. Mike McQuarrie, a spokesperson for Plaskett's office, told CNBC she has no immediate plans to refund the donation. No immediate plans to refund the donation. Keep in mind, this was afterwards. And considering what Epstein was convicted of, she took money from him. The right thing to do would be to give the money back, get rid of the money. But she wasn't willing to do that. But she wants to jump onto this subcommittee hearing and have the nerve to talk to two journalists about their credibility and their work. And she took money from Jeffrey Epstein and refused to return it. Let's go on. I'm pretty sure she's not, he said, and later confirmed in a follow-up phone call to verify her position, that his boss is unlikely to return the contribution. He declined to comment further about the investigation and how Plaskett knew Epstein. Now, why would he decline to comment on that? Why wouldn't he comment on how she knew him? I want to remind you, this is not a Congress member that can vote. She's from New York. She represents the Virgin Islands. She's more like a delegate, so to speak. So she can't vote. Why was she taking money from Jeffrey Epstein? Let's go on. Since the Virgin Islands is considered a territory, its representative in the House of Representatives is a delegate with limited voting power. Plaskett is involved with committees and has certain responsibilities on the floor, but not if her vote is going to be decisive. Still, the decision by Plaskett is significant as it shows that at least one politician is remaining defiant with holding on to donations from Epstein, even after Epstein's arrest. So I want to make this very clear. Even after he was arrested, she refused to give up the donations. He's been accused of blah, blah, blah. Gotta be careful what I say on here. Epstein created a vast network of underage victims. Epstein on Monday pled not guilty to the charges and has been ordered to be held without bail. And then it goes on to talk about his relationship with the Virgin Islands. Epstein, who owns an entire private island in the Virgin Islands called Little St. James, contributed $2,700 to Plaskett, the most an individual donor can give directly to a candidate in both the primary and the general election. So he gave her the maximum amount. Again, to someone who can't vote. Do you see the problem here? Why was he willing to give her that much money? The maximum amount to someone who can't even vote. Maybe it's because he has that island in the Virgin Islands, and we're going to get into that story as well, because he was trafficking people there. Let's go on. During her 2018 run for re-election, according to the Federal Election Commission record, in 2016, he wrote 2 separate $2,700 checks for Plaskett, including one during her primary campaign when she eventually won. She finished the 2018 congressional midterms, raising just over $359,000. Plaskett appears to be one of the few candidates that received a donation from Epstein last cycle. One of the few. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee saw a $10,000 check from him in October, but immediately sent it back. So the DCCC saw that $10,000 check and sent that one back. Epstein historically has been a staunch financial supporter of Democrats. He's also been friends with President Donald Trump. Now, speaking of the banking system and speaking of the banks, I want to remind you the connection that Jeffrey Epstein had with the Virgin Islands and JP Morgan. I covered this a while back. Just want to go ahead and remind you of this if you haven't had a chance to see it, and then you can go watch the full clip. The name of this clip is JP Morgan Exposed and Sued. So listen to this clip pretty quick. The U.S. government, the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands alleges in a lawsuit filed this week that JP Morgan Chase turned a blind eye to evidence that disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein used the bank to facilitate sex trafficking activities on Little St. James, the private island he owned in the territory until his 2019 suicide. Pause. Okay, so JP Morgan was complicit in this. So let's connect them. You had JP Morgan, you had the Virgin Islands, and you had Jeffrey Epstein. And then you have Jeffrey Epstein giving the maximum amount to a candidate who can't even vote, but she represents the Virgin Islands. You really should watch that entire clip, because the reason why that story was even reported is because the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands sued JP Morgan. She filed a lawsuit against them once she found out this information that they were complicit with Epstein's activities on her island, on the Virgin Islands. She filed that lawsuit. I reported that story. Literally, like 2 days later, she was fired. Coincidence? I think not. But Miss Plaskett, who was so quick to call people so-called journalists and wag her little finger at them and ask them for their sources and say she wasn't asking for sources, she had a lot to say to journalists. Maybe she just had something against those kind of journalists because they were doing independent journalism, and maybe she was afraid they might know some things about her like this. So for me, I don't think she should be on a committee, especially if we're going to talk about integrity. Let's keep it real. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. It is a hot mess. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Dems get paid to be reactive. Someone said put your money in a credit union. Credit unions, aka financial co-ops. Understand, Glass-Steagall, like any other regulation, is a regulation to capitalism, not a reform. Credit unions outside outside of North Dakota still went under after 2008. North Dakota has more credit unions and community banks per capita than any other state, and none of them went under. Public banks insure credit unions /CBs. Thank you for this tip as well. We must reinstate postal banking. Start CBIs for a network of public banks throughout the country at the municipal, state, regional level, U.S. regional level, so they can insure credit unions and community banks, and eventually push for the National Infrastructure Bank and audit the Federal Reserve. Doing that, you won't need to do antitrust enforcement or Glass-Steagall Act. Thank you so much for that. Bryce says, I call it hush money, Sabby. You know, I don't have any evidence of that. I don't want to speculate, but it looks a little suspicious. Marxist Mark says, Sabby Sabs doing more detective work connecting the dots than the police, LOL. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, you know, someone sent that my way, and I said, interesting. All right, we're going to get into our next story here. If you have not heard, the Biden administration has decided to move forward with a project called the Willow Project. Now, this is not a good thing, especially for those of you who are climate activists and you care about climate change. This is something that Joe Biden has kind of prided himself in, and implementing climate reform, signing off on climate reform legislation. But as I told you a couple of months ago, he was still signing on to projects that was actually hurting the environment and would actually make the climate disaster worse. I talked about the drilling that he approved off the coast of Texas. And now we have this project in Alaska that he has signed on to, but it not only hurts the environment, it's not only an issue in reference to climate change, but it's also an issue in reference to indigenous communities in that area. Shout out to Case Study QB here for this clip. This is when they were thinking about doing it. And then I'm going to show you some information that shows that he has approved this. This is really concerning.
In our Earth Matters series, the Biden administration is expected to make a decision soon on whether to approve a controversial oil drilling project in Alaska. And while there has been bipartisan support from the state's lawmakers and some native groups for the Willow Project, there is also a tremendous amount of pushback from climate activists in Alaska and beyond. Here's CNN's Renee Marsh.
At this point, the only way that this project can be stopped is if
on TikTok and Instagram, calls for President Biden to stop Willow Project, an urgent call that's gone viral to block a controversial Alaska oil drilling project.
Please help stop Willow.
The videos ranking up tens of millions of views, spurring more than 1 million letters to the White House and more than 3 million signatures to a Change.org petition.
In order to stop Willow, people need to know about Willow.
20-year-old Elise Joshi, a senior at the University of California, Berkeley, is one of the social media activists.
Will not just impact Alaska, it will not just impact this country, it'll impact the world. With the amount of carbon emissions that it will emit, we will see an increase in frequency and intensity of natural disasters.
ConocoPhillips' Willow project would be located in northwest Alaska on the National Petroleum Reserve, federal land roughly the size of Indiana. The project would tap as much as 600 million barrels of oil.
This is why we need to move away from depending on oil. This is why. Now, you guys know, like, Alaska is kind of known for this. I mean, like, there are people I've known that have moved to Alaska to work in the oil industry. But we as a society, we have to find a way to move away from oil. And climate activists have been preaching about this for a long time. So have climate scientists as well. But here we are again. Now, Joe Biden signed on to climate legislation, which was a part of that Inflation Reduction Act, which really wasn't about inflation at all. But he signed on to that. But signing on to particular legislation to help try to fight climate change doesn't mean anything if at the same time you are signing on to projects that are deeply, deeply hurting the environment. It's a wash, basically. And I've said this before, even that climate legislation that was passed, that does not go far enough. I've had this conversation multiple times with people, and they'll agree to that. And to go along with that, you have him trying to drill in Alaska, also on the coast of Texas, all for the need for oil. Let's go on.
But it would take years for it to make it to market. It's messy politics for President Biden, pitting his climate promises against the desire to produce energy at home and lower gas prices. The project would release as much planet-warming carbon emissions per year as adding 2 million gas-powered cars to the road annually.
You see this? 2 million cars to the road annually. That's how much that would emit into the air. I'm at this point where I would just want to say, screw cars, just screw it all. Like, get me a flying scooter. Give me something like that. I don't know. Someone invent this somewhere, a flying scooter where I can just hop on my little scooter. I can press a button just like George Jetson, right? Remember the Jetsons? I can just press that little button, go up into the air and fly on that scooter wherever I need to go. Someone, let's bring us something like that. I'm so done with cars. And this is why people need to understand, even if people tell you, like people just said this, well, to help the environment, just buy an electric vehicle. That's not enough. And also, not everyone can afford to buy another car. Not everyone can afford to buy an electric vehicle either. That's nothing when you have people drilling in Alaska for oil. That's nothing when you have people drilling off the coast of Texas. That's nothing when you have the military-industrial complex still fighting these wars. None of that is going to curb it. So we got to fight here. You got to fight for your future. You got to fight for your children's future. You got to fight for your grandchildren, your future, your children's future, your grandchildren's future. It's all going to be affected by this. Like, this is not okay. You see, Joe Biden's like, what, 80 something years old? He's not going to be affected. That's the problem.
That's according to a government estimate.
Loss of taste and smell, dizziness.
Sikanik Maupin's family lives near the proposed site, and she recently traveled to Washington to protest outside the White House against the Willow project, despite its economic benefits.
We've been held in an economic hostage situation. We either choose our health, our children's health, our ways of life, or being able to have plumbing and infrastructure and running water.
Nagruk Hasharik's family has also lived in the region for generations. He supports the project. His nonprofit represents 24 Native communities, corporations, and local governments who say the project would be an economic boon and help the U.S. wean off of foreign oil.
Joe Biden has chosen profits over climate and over community. So the talks that he gives about, yes, we have to invest in the African-American community. We have to fight for the soul of this country. It's a lot of virtue signaling, but the actions say the exact opposite. Because if you really do care about indigenous people, you wouldn't be trying to drill oil on their land and hurt their community. You wouldn't do that. This is all about profit.
The economics that a project like this would bring into the region, mainly to the North Slope Borough in the form of taxes to help provide and maintain first world conditions.
Meantime, the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than anywhere else on the planet due to climate change.
We cannot keep drilling for new fossil fuels if we want to address climate change.
Nope.
Well, ConocoPhillips tells CNN in a statement that this project will create, quote, good union jobs, and the project has undergone a comprehensive regulatory process for nearly 5 years with extensive public input. And Erica, we could see that decision come from the Biden administration as soon as next week.
And it did happen. So here's the thing, creating good union jobs. I'm all for union jobs. I'm all for that. But there are other ways that you can create those jobs without destroying the environment, without destroying people's communities. Are these the jobs that Joe Biden's been talking about? We created all these jobs. These the jobs? What good are those union jobs if you don't have a community to live in? What good are those jobs if you're going to be underwater? Do you see the line of thinking? This is just all about short-term profits. It's all about greed, corporate greed. And this is why we say that they're corrupt, because they are willing to throw, I want to be really clear about this, you guys. They are willing to throw our future away so that they can make a short buck. All of us should be livid about this. There should be thousands and thousands of people protesting right now because of this situation. How many times are they going to continue to screw younger people over? This is our future. First, it was the student loan debt. He messed that up. Then it was, we're going to codify Roe v. Wade. Not happening. Then it was, I passed climate legislation and he's doing this behind your back. How many times are we going to let them just sit here and destroy our future? A lot of us already can't buy homes, can't buy cars, can't start a family. This is not acceptable. And this is one of those issues, and I have to be very clear. This is one of those issues where you're going to have to get past. You're really going to have to get past this whole purity test. You have to do this. Because this is an issue where you can't just say, I'm only going to align with these groups of people that do this kind of thing. This is something that is going to affect every single one of us. So they just told you the Arctic is warming faster. This is not good. Do you see why I get upset sometimes about the purity test? Now, CNN released this article here. It was approved. Biden administration approves controversial Willow oil project in Alaska. Now it's galvanized online activism. And here's the young woman here that you saw in the previous video clip. She is one of the activists that are in that area. And it says here, the Willow project is a decades-long oil drilling venture in the National Petroleum Reserve, which is owned by the federal government. The area where the project is planned holds up to 600 million barrels of oil, though that oil would take years to reach the market since the project has yet to be constructed. By the administration's own estimates, the project would generate enough oil to release 9.2 million metric tons of planet warming carbon pollution. Highlight this piece here. Planet warming carbon pollution. A year equivalent to adding 2 million gas-powered cars to the roads. This is terrible. Listen to this statement here from Lisa Murkowski. We finally did it. Willow is finally reapproved. And we can almost literally feel Alaska's future brightening because of it. Now, she's a Republican, so here you have Joe Biden siding along with Republicans, so we have bipartisan support to destroy the planet. How is Alaska's future going to be brighter if people are underwater? All these emissions into the air. Now, one of the activists, believe it's the same activist, she was on Democracy Now! And I want you to hear her interview here. And the name of this video is called Climate and Indigenous Activists Decry Reports Biden Will Approve Willow Oil Drilling Arctic Project. So when you guys hear them, I'm going to be very clear. When you hear them make these statements that, oh, we signed sleeping climate legislation, you need to push back on that.
Organizations are reporting the Biden administration's preparing to formally approve a massive oil and gas development in northern Alaska known as the Willow Project. Approval of the $8 billion ConocoPhillips development is expected to be announced today, greenlighting the drilling of some 600 million barrels of crude oil. Climate activists and many indigenous groups had urged Biden to reject the project, warning it'll create a carbon bomb. In advance of approving the Willow Project, the Biden administration also announced on Sunday steps to reduce oil drilling in other parts of the Arctic. This includes barring future oil and gas leasing for 3 million acres of federal waters in the Arctic Ocean and limiting drilling in a further 13 million acres in the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska's North Slope. Kristen Mansell of the Center for Biological Diversity criticized the Biden plan, saying, quote, protecting one area of the Arctic so you can destroy another doesn't make sense, and it won't help the people and wildlife who will be upended by the Willow Project, they said. We go now to North Pole, Alaska, where we're joined by Sikanik Malpan, Executive Director of the Sovereign Inupiat for a Living Arctic. It's great to have you back. Thanks so much for joining us, Sikanik. Can you talk about what you understand is being announced today?
Well, recently on Friday afternoon, the Bloomberg report came out saying that there was speculations that the Biden administration will approve a 3-pad plan instead of the 5-pad original plan. And now we're hearing that he will make his decision Monday at about 9 a.m., but we're not for sure.
Yeah, so the decision was already made.
While campaigning in 2020, then presidential candidate Joe Biden said, quote, no more drilling on federal lands, period. This is candidate Biden responding to a question about his position on drilling in the Arctic.
Watch this.
Yes, he made
I think I'm the only one, maybe not the only one running who's been up in the Arctic Circle. Remember the great oil spill that occurred? And I watched when I went up there, and I went up in a helicopter up in the North Slope and saw what was going on and saw what was happening as the glaciers began to melt and how the caribou and everyone, there's a lot going on up there. And it's a real gigantic problem. And by the way, no more drilling on federal lands, period. Period, period, period.
Do you see why you can't trust the politics? You see why you can't trust them? That was his statement. No more drilling on federal land. And here we are. He hasn't even finished a full term. Couldn't wait to drill. Couldn't wait.
Well, the Arctic Circle is a disaster to do that.
So that was candidate Biden. And again, the little part we missed at the beginning of what the candidate said was, I'm completely, totally opposed to drilling in the Arctic. Sikanik Malpan, describe this project. What is the Willow Project and what you understand President Biden's announcing today?
Well, this is the biggest oil and gas leasing project that's on public lands right now. It is a massive project that would be happening in the North Slope. Closest community would be Nuiqsut, and this would completely encircle the community in oil and gas, which already has Prudhoe Bay, Alpine, and this is just the start of the project, because this could green light for further exploration, further development, and this project would emit so much carbon, it would actually double the amount that Biden had promised that he would reduce. And so all of his plans to reduce the CO2 being released would be nullified by this project, and then putting back double what he said he was going to reduce.
And this would also cause health problems as well, because who's going to be breathing in that air? They are, the indigenous people. How many times is our government going to allow for indigenous land to be corrupted, to be destroyed? How many pipelines they're going to put through? There was this whole push to stop Line 3. Remember this? We talked about this last year. Stop Line 3. You had the pipelines there. You had like the pipelines going through Flint, the dirty water in Flint. These are working class and poor communities of people of color. So you have the indigenous communities that have constantly been affected. Let's go back to Standing Rock. Let's remember that as well. And you have Black communities that are constantly affected. They don't care because they see these groups as disposable. And that's what this really comes down to, guys. You would never see them try to do this in Beverly Hills. You don't see them trying to put pipelines through wealthy white neighborhoods. It does not happen. They attack the poor, they attack those that are vulnerable, and they attack the working class. And those are usually communities of color. This is a big problem. You see the same thing happening in the Appalachian Mountains, where a lot of poor and working class people live. The same thing. This is where they funnel it. And this is how you end up with environmental pollution in those areas. They don't care if they give you the dirty water. They don't care if your air is polluted, because they see those groups as disposable. And that's what people really have to understand. You can go across the street in Boston. If you stand on one side of the street, you're in Roxbury at the intersection of Mass Ave. If you stand on the other side of the street, you're on the South End. If you leave the South End and you walk across the street to Roxbury, your life expectancy drops by 30 years for the people who live on that side. And part of that has to do with the environmental pollution. How many more indigenous groups we have to see on media, whether it's Standing Rock, whether it's this Willow Project group, whether it's Stopping Line 3? How many more? We've interviewed some of them. We've interviewed water protectors on RBN. We had a whole summit where we brought on different groups, and we interviewed, at least I did that interview, the water protector group, where they came on, they were indigenous, and they came on, they talked about what's happening to their water in their communities. So these politicians, like I said before, those going through that two-party system, they just virtue signal to these groups. And at the same time, they are slowly destroying their communities.
And can you talk about why you've invested so much time and energy into protesting this and the two parts of the plan that's being announced today?
Because it's our community,
yes,
Amy.
I want to say personally, I've been trying to fight this project for about 4 years. And on a more personal level, my mother lives in Nuiqsut. My family is from Nuiqsut. And although I wasn't raised there, I have a deep connection and love for the community. And in 2018, I was invited to go to an air quality monitoring system planning session. And currently, ConocoPhillips owns the only air quality monitoring system in place in Nuiqsut. And they also own most of the research that is quoted for the safety of this project to go forward. So we went over the top 10 pollutants that are put out by ConocoPhillips that's required to be put to the EPA, and what the possible impact is from being exposed to those pollutants like cancer, respiratory illness, and other things, even changing the sex in the womb of a child from male to female. And in that session, there was community members, the youth council, and a lot of us realized that we had seen these occurrences in our family. We had seen increase in cancer, respiratory illnesses. And in 2012, there was a blowout, a Repsol blowout, and that caused one child to be medevaced from the village, another one to have permanent health problems with their respiratory system. And many people have complained recently. There was a gas leak near Nuxet in the Alpine field, and they didn't evacuate the village. They said that they were fine, but many people self-evacuated because children were complaining of nausea, headaches, and not feeling well. And so currently there is no plan put into place to help evacuate or keep the community of Nuxet safe. And as I learned more about this project and its impacts, not just to the community and the public health, but the climate impacts were significant. The Arctic is warming at 4 times the rate than the rest of the world. And while many people speculate climate change, we're living it. We're seeing in the Yukon River, they haven't been able to fish for many years, subsistence fishing. We are seeing caribou that are showing signs of starvation. We're seeing fish pop up with mold. And this project is going to accelerate those issues and create food insecurity and many, many issues that is not just going to affect Nuxet or the 8 communities in the North Slope, but the entire Arctic itself. And then, of course, globally, it's going to affect people for climate change. And so this project, we're concerned about for those reasons, but we also want to transition away from oil and gas. And this would lock us into oil and gas for the next 30 years. And so, and we wouldn't actually see any of the benefits economically for 10 years. So this would be something that, a catastrophe for Biden, who had promised that he would transition us into clean energy. And what is also concerning is that systematically, we've seen that small rural places like this, time and time again, coal, gold mining, have been in an economic hostage situation where they're told that the only way that they can get basic necessities like running water and plumbing and such is to sacrifice their health, their lands, their food security, and so many more consequences from this project.
Okay, so something she said there that I think is incredibly important. Remember, I mentioned the health issues, right? So again, increase in cancer, respiratory illnesses that you have there. She already told you that they're starting to see like the fishing industry is being affected by these pollutants. So these individuals that live in those communities, again, they're more likely to have more health problems. You can see this also in places like Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi. You can see it in places like Baltimore, Maryland. If you go into a lot of these inner city neighborhoods where I told you, like Roxbury here in Boston as well, is that they do have increased rates of asthma. They have increased rates of respiratory illnesses and cancer as well because of the environmental pollution. So again, like I said, there's a big issue here. It's not just about the climate as well. It also affects the health of the people that live in those communities. Now, the Sunrise Movement, they saw this and they didn't like it, of course, and rightfully so. They actually tweeted about this. President Biden officially approved the Willow project. Instead of sticking to his own climate goals and listening to the millions of young people who carried the party for the last 3 election cycles, POTUS is letting the fossil fuel industry have their way. But see, I to Sunrise Movement, I just have to say, I'm not sure what you expected to come from Joe Biden. Even when people were applauding him for that recent climate legislation, part of that legislation was to give some type of something to Joe Manchin here, where Joe Manchin still wanted to allow these fossil fuel companies to be able to have private land. So there was always something in it for the fossil fuel companies. And this is what I was trying to tell people back then. I was told I was being pessimistic. I was just giving you the facts. And sometimes the facts may not be what you want to hear, but you need to know the truth. They rarely pass legislation that does not have some type of corporate interest attached. And that is important for people to fully understand. So I'm sorry to the Sunrise Movement that you seem to be surprised about this, but we knew exactly who Joe Biden was before he became president. Now, there is something that you can do. There is a petition that you can sign to stop the Willow project. Right now, they're almost at that goal. They have over 3 million that have signed. So they're almost there. But Corey, or actually Eric, sorry, Corey. Sorry, Eric. Eric, could you put the link to the petition in the chat for people so they can sign this? But I highly recommend that you guys sign this petition. They really want to get to that goal. And this is through change.org. And I know sometimes people feel that petitions don't really do anything, but I would still sign it, you guys. I would still sign it. Like, this is a serious issue. And I really do wish there was a massive protest for this. I really do. I'll take that comment on Rockfin. Thank you for your tip on Rockfin, Andrew. Public banks are the way to go. You and Roger are always on point there. This banking collapse is monopoly power at work, and it's also a smokescreen to keep people's attention away from inflation and unionization. Deb Haaland is a total sellout for sitting back silently while Biden pushes forward new oil and gas projects that are some of the biggest danger to indigenous people across Indian country. And thank you for this tip as well, Andrew. The first diesel style engines ran on peanut oil. We can still keep cars running on biofuel and power homes / factories with other sources. We can make some of it happen grassroots. Thank you so much. And thank you for this tip as well, Trimble. Love y'all. I really appreciate RBN and y'all drawing the line in the sand with the pseudo left. You, Nick, JB, CJ, Rome, Afeni. Please keep going. Just say no to the Bernie Sanders industrial complex. Thank you from a doorknob. P.S. I'm looking forward to y'all's analysis and actions in 2024. Cheers. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Wind and fire at max power only produces 25% to 35% of energy output. Nuclear, 93%. Nuclear produces just 4% CO2 of natural gas-powered power plant. That's less than the FFs used to create solar. It's not subject to variable weather conditions. The production of the energy itself doesn't depend on putting more methane or CO2 into the air or place high costs on a community. Provides true energy independence, not subject. US2 supply chain issues solar, creates 300 times more heavily toxic waste per unit of energy than nuclear power plants. The size of 2 Mount Everest sitting on top of one another. 93% of nuclear waste can be repurposed. But make it work. We must nationalize, stationalize, municipalize, or cooperatize. We can't take the chance of giving to private equity. Think SVB and Ohio. Speaking of power for my upstaters, there is a plan to pass in New York state budget to extend the powers of the New York Power Authority, the largest state public power utility in the United States, which NYPA provides some of the lowest cost electricity in the nation, extending it to not just municipalities, schools, and businesses, but residents as a public option as well. Interesting. Thank you so much for that, Roger. I'll go to the comments here on YouTube. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. Meant to say glass is a reform, not a reform. Oh, thank you. Falsification. This is why MMT is so important. Raising money and creating jobs is always the excuse. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. We keep pumping the Earth's insulation out of the ground and protecting it with our military. It costs us billions more than they make to defend. That's interesting. Terry says it's all about money. Exactly. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. NYPA talking using batteries with fire and wind, by the way. Interesting. You guys are always keeping me up to date. The Oracle says no one is listening to or looking out for poor, the masses of poor and working poor. I hear you. I totally hear you. Okay. Did we put the petition link in the chat so people can sign? I guess so, because I see people saying they signed the petition. Okay. All right. We are moving on to our next story. Not as heavy as what we were just talking about. I think you'll appreciate that. Oh, Eric, have we moved the banners? Let me know. I don't know. I usually will check, but I forget. Okay, thanks. All right. Briahna Joy Gray had a conversation recently with Ro Khanna. Now, they talked about different topics, but the one topic that I want to focus on is this need for some of these so-called progressives, so to speak, to feel that they need to endorse and support Joe Biden over someone like Marianne Williamson, who is running against Joe Biden, who agrees with them on issues like Medicare for all. Now, I, for one, am not a part of the two-party system. I'm a registered independent. I came from that Bernie movement, done with the Bernie movement, done with the squad. All of these people have failed me in my experience. They have just failed. They have not fought for us. Don't want to get into all of that, but if you've been with me for a while, you've heard the story before. But for those who do support that strategy, I think this brings up a good question. Why is that? If you really care about Medicare for all and you really want everyone to have health care in this country, why would you not endorse the candidate who is for Medicare for all? So that is one of the things that they're going to discuss in this interview that I found particularly interesting. And I think Ro Khanna really reveals himself here. So let's go ahead and get into that really quick before I forget, because I do. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys. That helps me with the algo. And let's go ahead and get into this discussion.
I mean, I think that's right, but that gets to the heart of the problem. How do you get these kinds of reforms? I felt as though part of why I wanted to support somebody like Bernie Sanders was because he was very clear-eyed about why it is that the system isn't working, why it is that government is not democratic, and had a number of reforms to try to get at the root of that. I don't feel that way about Joe Biden, and you mentioned Medicare for all, you mentioned all of these incredibly important policies were a part of that package. So it kind of raises the question, why has there been such a quick coalescence around the idea of supporting Joe Biden should he announce a run for re-election in 2024 among, in particular, progressives in the House? Pramila Jayapal, the Progressive Caucus, has very quickly said that they plan to endorse Joe Biden if he runs. Why not take a beat and see if there is a candidate that emerges that at very least is willing to commit to things like Medicare for all, unlike Joe Biden, who, as I'm sure you remember, said that he would veto Medicare for all even if it were able to pass the House and the Senate. Maybe it's someone like Marianne Williamson is obviously the only one who's thrown her hat in the ring thus far. She does support Medicare for all, a number of other Bernie-aligned policies, but it's still so early in the game. Why commit, I would argue, prematurely to voting and endorsing for Joe Biden?
So Bree kind of puts Ro Khanna in the hot seat here because he is one of those candidates that did support and endorse Bernie Sanders when Bernie ran. He is one of those politicians that said that, he supports Medicare for all. He considers himself to be a progressive. I interviewed Ro Khanna a couple of months ago, and many of you have reached out and said you should bring him back on. Some of you have reached out and said, don't ever bring him back on again. I really don't see the need to interview Ro Khanna again because I think he showed all of you who he really is. I think I asked him some really tough questions, and he made it very clear to me that he thought third parties was a problem, particularly Jill Stein. Now, he's saying something different today, but that's not what he said to me a couple months ago. He thought they were very problematic. He thought Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton the election. All this, neoliberal talk that he presented when I spoke to him on this show. So for me, I was like, nope, don't need to bring him back on here. I already know. I know what you're about. I know what's happening here. I don't need to have another conversation with you. It's very clear. I don't feel like he's one of those people that can be moved on particular issues. There are people that I've spoken to that can. But she puts him in the hot seat. If you say that you're for Medicare for all, why would you endorse and support the presidential candidate who's against it instead of supporting the candidate who is for it? Now, listen to what Khanna says, because this just cracks me up.
I said that the person I would support would be Bernie Sanders, but given that he has said that he's not running, I think that the president has done a lot of things that have been more progressive than I anticipated. I mean, the climate bill.
Okay, let's go back to what he just said, and then we'll go on. He just said, well, you know, I would support Bernie Sanders, but Khanna knows that Bernie Sanders is not running. He knows that Joe Biden, he's supposed to announce in April. He knows that Joe Biden is running. So to that point, why are you bringing up Bernie Sanders when you know that Bernie Sanders is not running? She just mentioned two people to you that are running, Joe Biden and Marianne Williamson. So if Marianne Williamson supports Medicare for all and Joe Biden doesn't, why are you bringing up Bernie Sanders? Let's go on. Now he brings up, well, Joe Biden's done some progressive things like the climate legislation. I just explained to you right before this news story what Joe Biden's doing right now in reference to the Willow Project, in reference to climate. So Joe Biden's continuing to destroy the climate. But Khanna doesn't say this.
That he ended up passing, the sense that the Build Back Better, even though it didn't get passed for universal child care, $15 wage. So I think he has won confidence from a lot of progressives in adopting significant chunks of Elizabeth.
We did not get $15 minimum wage. Did you guys catch that one? We did not. Yes, Lucy, he's playing. We did not get $15 minimum wage. In fact, there was 7 Democrats who voted against it and 1 independent who voted against it. So I know, Eric, right? He slid that one in there. We did not get that.
Warren and Bernie Sanders his agenda. And I'm going to support him for re-election. That said, some of the attacks I've seen, at least online, on Marianne Williamson are totally beyond the pale. I mean, a democracy should have competition, and if someone wants to run on ideas, that's their right. I've said that about third-party candidates. I've said that about primaries in Congress. I've said that to people who run against me in primaries. I don't think you should squelch dissent or competition. I will make the case to the president, but if other people want to run and make the case for where the party should go, that's democracy.
Let me pause for a second. Notice he didn't answer the question. So the question that she asked him was, why not support the candidate that does support Medicare for all? Why are you so quick to endorse Joe Biden, who does not support Medicare for all? He didn't answer the question. He gave this roundabout response. Well, I supported Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders is not running. And he never answered the question as to why he is not willing to support the candidate that is running on Medicare for all against Joe Biden. Let's go on. That comment that he made about third-party candidates too, I'm going to look for that. I'm going to grab that video, that interview I did with him, because I'm going to show you what he said about third-party candidates.
So I would dispute the idea that there's a significant amount of progressive confidence in Joe Biden. We might be defining who's progressive wrong, or differently rather. But even if we put that to the side for a second, when I've asked you this question before, you've alluded to the things that Biden has done that have surprised you that are positive. And I have no interest in bickering over the significance of any given policy. Of course, any president is going to do some things that are positive. And given the very low bar that Joe Biden set as one of the most conservative politicians in the 2020 Democratic primary race, it certainly would be easy for him, in my view, to surpass expectations. However, that doesn't really get to the heart of the question, which is issues like Medicare for all, policies like Medicare for all were so central to what Bernie was fighting for and to what attracted 30% of Democrats to want to support him. So, is this kind of ephemeral notion that Biden has won the confidence of progressives more important than putting your voice behind policies that have the ability to so radically change the lives of millions of Americans.
So again, this is another way I think she's trying to help him a little bit and be like, look, you didn't answer the question. But again, she's asking, why aren't you putting your voice behind those policies? Because it's true. If you say that you're passionate about Medicare for all, but you're not willing to support the one candidate right now who is passionate about Medicare for all, and you still believe in this duopoly, I do not. But if you still believe in this duopoly, it does not make sense that you would still support Joe Biden. Because to me, that says you really don't see Medicare for all as an urgent issue. So it's not a sense of urgency for Ro Khanna, and that's a problem.
Well, I saw a poll the other day. I mean, polls are all over the place, though, that 18 to 34-year-olds, the majority wanted him to run for re-election, which I attribute to both the student debt issue that we all fought for and climate that we all fought for. But absolutely, Medicare for all was a missed opportunity after the pandemic. I mean, we could have done simple things. We could have said we're going to raise Medicaid to cover up to 300% of poverty. That would have expanded coverage. I mean, I'm saying even if you didn't go for all of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all, which I support, we could.
But no one is asking you what you could have said or what you could have done. We all know what could have been done. The question is, why aren't you putting your voice behind those policies when it comes to endorsing and supporting the candidates that support that policy? No one's asking. Ro Khanna likes to do this. He likes to do this thing where he's like, well, it's not as progressive as you or I would want it. I mean, aren't there other things we can do? Oh, absolutely. But, there has been some progress. He says this in multiple interviews. It's a way for him to not really answer the question.
I've said we're going to have seniors get hearing, vision, dental. We could have extended Medicare to 60 or 55 as a step of going in the direction. We could have had more robust hearings on it. We could have had the president say aspirationally, I'm for Medicare for all. I've seen and changed my mind during the pandemic, and I understand why that's important. None of that has happened. And on healthcare, we have a tremendous amount of work to do. I guess my point is, I think the progressive movement pushing for Medicare for all will be better off in 2028 after 8 years of Joe Biden than if we have.
Back up the truck. I hope you heard that comment right there. Let's back it up a little bit. I told you it's not a sense of urgency. And he proves that. Listen.
I'm saying even if you didn't go for all of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all, which I support, we could have said we're going to have seniors get hearing, vision, dental. We could have extended Medicare to 60 or 55 as a step of going in the direction. We could have had more robust hearings on it. We could have had the president say aspirationally, I'm for Medicare for all. I've seen and changed my mind during the pandemic, and I understand why that's important. None of that has happened. And on healthcare, we have a tremendous amount of work to do. I guess my point is, I think the progressive movement pushing for Medicare for all will be better off in 2028.
We'll be better off in 2028. So Ro Khanna thinks that even though there's all these people out here that have died during the pandemic because of lack of insurance or no insurance, even though there are people out here who are struggling with medical debt, Ro Khanna thinks it's best to wait until 2028 to try to fight for it. It's 2023. That's 5 years from now. You see, this is what I've mentioned before. He does not see this as an urgent issue. He has good health insurance. Congressmen and women have great health insurance. Do you see the problem? You see why they don't talk about Medicare for all that much anymore? You notice how the squad don't talk about Medicare for all anymore? You notice that? Because they already got the memo. They already got the memo that, nope, let's not even try to mention this or push this until 2028. Could have been pushed during Force the Vote. Could have put pressure on Nancy Pelosi and everybody else in that house to pass Medicare for all. Could have been pushed then. They had opportunities. They had time. And listen, as much as Ro Khanna will come on to independent media outlets, Ro Khanna didn't force the vote. Ro Khanna didn't come to the force the vote town hall. It's not an urgent issue to him, you guys. He said it out loud.
After 8 years of Joe Biden, that if we have Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. Now, you may say that's a very pragmatic way of looking at it, and maybe it is. But I have not given up on the core principles that I'm very proud. I supported Bernie Sanders twice. I chaired his campaign. Obviously, that's what I believe is a just society. And the good news is there are more and more of us in the House who are ascribing to that platform.
I guess I wouldn't characterize it as, or my critique of that approach is not that it's too pragmatic. It's that it presumes that if a populist progressive candidate were elected in the Democratic primary in 2024, that it would lead to a Ron DeSantis or a Donald Trump being president. And I would say that 2028 looks a lot better if we had had 4 years of Joe Biden and then 4 years of a progressive that support Medicare for all, than 8 years of a president who is so aggressively against Medicare for all that he'd said he'd veto it, even if it were supported by all of Congress, and who took more money from the billionaire class in the pharmaceutical industry than anybody else did in the healthcare industry in 2020, which I think there's a direct relationship, to go back to our conversation before about the influence of lobbying. There's a direct relationship between that and his vehement opposition to the kind of healthcare reforms that most Americans want. I should also note, if we're talking about polls, that a February 6th poll showed that most Democrats, not to mention everybody else, don't want Joe Biden to seek a second term. So our progressives, our Democrats, especially progressive-leaning ones, foregoing an opportunity here to capitalize on public sentiment, both against Joe Biden as a politician and for the policies that Joe Biden rejects, to try to run somebody in this moment.
Just want to pause here for a second, because I don't know where he got that poll from. I noticed it was a particular age group, but she's right. The majority of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to, according to the polls that I've seen. I don't know what poll he was looking at, but the polls that I've seen, the majority of Democrats do not want Joe Biden to run for a second term.
No, because I think to beat Trump or DeSantis, you're going to need someone with brand identification. I feel differently in 2028, but that's why I think Bernie has the brand, right? I mean, if Bernie were to say, "Look, I'm going to run, and I think I can win," that's why I said I would support Bernie Sanders. I'm not saying.
But Bernie said he's not going to run. Obviously, things change. But Bernie says he's not going to run, and the likelihood that he would run in 2028 is even more slim, I think, just generally speaking, given his age and whatnot. So apart from Bernie, unless you're able to name another Democrat, another progressive who you believe has name recognition, aren't we just punting down the line to being told in 2028 you're going to have to vote for some milquetoast neoliberal, maybe even Pete Buttigieg, because it's going to be Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis isn't going anywhere. He's a young man. Even if he loses, if he runs in 2024, and if he loses, he's still going to be there to take another bite at the apple down the line.
But the problem I think that we're going to run into is, even if you support the progressive candidate, like even if you support Marianne Williamson, we saw Bernie Sanders do this twice in a row. Even if you support Marianne Williamson and she loses, which I believe that she will, because I don't think the DNC is going to let her even have a chance of getting in there, especially if you're running on something like Medicare for all, then that progressive candidate in turn tells you to vote for the neoliberal candidate anyway. And that's the problem that I think I had with the progressive movement, is that they don't really fight and push back on the corporate Democrats like they're supposed to. In the end, they just tell you to support the same corruption and greed that they told you to fight against. And that's the problem that I have. And I think that's the thing. Like, if those people, if the squad members were to leave that party and sign up for a third party or start their own party, I think they'd be surprised by how much support they may have from their supporters. Like, I think a lot of people would follow them, because there are people I know that are AOC stans. So if AOC said, "I'm leaving the Democratic Party because both of these parties are corrupt and we can't get anything done in reference to progressive policies. Who's coming with me? We'll organize on the outside and we'll organize on the inside. Who's coming with me? I bet you thousands of people would sign up and follow her. That's the thing. So the progressives, like, they're still Democrats. They're still part of the same party that is corrupt. So they're still part of that same corruption. And that's the problem that we run into. And
I agree with that. I think a progressive could easily beat Ron DeSantis, and I think 2028 will be an open field, and I hope 3-4 progressives run, and I think they will win, because I think Bernie Sanders' agenda was popular, and if everyone had dropped out at the end and endorsed Biden, and if there wasn't the pandemic, and if it weren't for the fact that Biden was Obama's vice president, Bernie Sanders would have won that nomination. I mean, you and I were there. We did very well in Iowa, won New Hampshire, won Nevada. Nate Silver had the probability afterwards of Bernie Sanders winning at 70% for the nomination. So what the progressives need to be doing is not to forget how close Sanders came and realize that we're going to have a moment to build on that in 28. Look.
See, pay attention. He keeps talking about 2028. So I said this a while back. Don't be surprised if Khanna runs in 2028. He already said he's not running in 2024. Don't be surprised if he runs for president in 2028. You see the little hints that he's throwing out? But the thing is this, like I said, the DNC is the problem. They're not going to allow, especially someone running on that Medicare for all rhetoric, they're not going to allow them to win. Yes, Bernie Sanders came very close. But look what happened. Based on the polls, Bernie Sanders should have outright won. But again, the DNC had its trickery. Barack Obama made a couple phone calls. That's how it works. Same thing, 2016. When you had Bernie Sanders win every county in West Virginia and the superdelegates decided to give the state to Hillary Clinton, they play tricks like that. Tricks like allowing people like Mike Bloomberg to join the debates late in the game, changing the rules so that he can join because he's corporate. Tricks like that. Making sure that people like Marianne Williamson and Andrew Yang, when they ran in 2020, don't have a voice by cutting off their mics when they're on the debate stage. They do little things like that. So this is why I say that entire system is corrupt. And until you change that system, people don't really get a fair chance. It was already decided, in my opinion, they had already decided who they wanted. And that's how it works, unfortunately.
The centrist wing of the party is often very strategic. Hillary Clinton, after she lost in 2008, bided her time and ran in 16 and won. And I think the progressive movement, if we lost in 20 and we build, can ensure that in 28, 32, 36, we have a progressive nominee. What does that mean? That means a nominee who will change back the Democratic platform of Medicare for all. I voted against the platform last time, to much criticism, but our platform used to have Medicare for all as part of it up till Ted Kennedy. I think it was changed in 1980. It means a president who's going to clearly be for free college.
Yes, he did. I'm glad you caught that, the Oracle. Did he really just say if all the other candidates didn't just drop out? You see the framing? You see the framing?
Free vocational education. It's going to be someone who's going to be for taxing the ultra wealthy, who's going to be clearly for a livable wage, and would say, I'll fire the parliamentarian if the parliamentarian gets in the way. I think those principles can be the table stakes for the nominee going forward.
So when he talks about firing the parliamentarian, George W. Bush, during his administration, they did that. They got rid of the parliament. The parliamentarian was getting in the way. So they were like, you got to go. We could do that too. Like that could be done right now. Joe Biden could do that right now if the parliamentarian was such a problem to the Democratic Party that they say it is. They don't see the parliamentarian as such a problem because the parliamentarian honestly is part of it. To me, it's just part of the process. It's part of how they want things to go. So they have someone to blame. It's like Glenn Greenwald says about the rotating villain. Like they can point to a parliamentarian. They can point to Joe Manchin. They can point to Kirsten Sinema, right? They can point to these people to say, we couldn't pass it because X, Y, and Z. And if you get rid of those people and you put in people that actually would pass those things, then they would not have an excuse. But those people would change their mind too, because again, they learn to work with the system that benefits their political careers. That's what happens.
What has been gained, Representative Khanna? What is gained? Because by you not endorsing a candidate that's like that now, or not articulating at very least that you're going to sit out of it because Biden does not rise to the level of those stated ideals or those policy objectives that are so core. And maybe you don't believe that, let's say, someone like Marianne Williamson has a viable chance of winning, but at least an acknowledgement that on paper, from a policy perspective, she checks off all of the boxes of the policies that you just listed. Because what ends up happening, from my view, is that there is a
Notice Ro Khanna didn't mention any foreign policy positions. Ro Khanna talked about domestic policy. Notice he didn't mention foreign policy. I didn't hear anything about Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, Syria, Yemen. We talked about the kids starving in Yemen today on RBN. You noticed that? Let's go on.
Diminished confidence in the progressives that are left because they refuse to distinguish themselves in meaningful ways from folks like Joe Biden. You can make criticisms of him all you want, but if at the end of the day, you're always endorsing him, focusing on the things that he's done good rather than all of the disappointments, not focusing on the things that he could do with his executive authority that he has refused to do, it diminishes the brand of what it even means to be a progressive. Not to mention, Representative Khanna, and I'd be remiss not to mention this, doing things like voting to condemn socialism, which was something that you voted for. I mean, how do you explain that kind of decision and expect progressives to still have confidence in this time down the lane in the future, 2028 or whenever it is, that someone like yourself or someone who has been framing themselves as a progressive is actually going to be progressive when it matters if you were not willing to vote against things like a ridiculous performative condemnation of socialism?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer both questions. First, on the question of supporting Joe Biden, I believe that the choice is between right now Biden and the Republican field, and that President Biden being there would help us make further progress on climate, on student loans, or on finally, hopefully, getting some increase in a livable wage, even if we don't get to $15. And I do think we would make that progress if we took back the House, and that's why I'm supporting him as the incumbent Democratic president. But where I am different than many other Democrats is I have always said respectful things about Marianne Williamson. I have said that I respect and admire a number of her positions. I've said that she should not be chased out of or bullied out of the race. And if she wants to raise progressive policies to help move the party in a progressive direction, to move the president in a progressive direction, fine, good. I mean, let's embrace conversation. And I think that's one difference. You say, what is the difference? It's that I do make room for both progressive critique and progressive candidacies, but I am going to support Joe Biden on Liz Sanders.
Like he tells on himself here. He really does tell on himself here. He's letting you know, yeah, I support all those things, but I am going to support Joe Biden. It does not make any sense. Ro just trying to keep his seat. See, Ro, no, they already had this conversation probably. Ro has probably already been told by people, listen, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Biden could have already said to him, you support me in 2024, I'll make sure I support you come 2028 if you run for president.
The idea that it's a Democratic primary, though, that I'm stuck with, because there's a lot of progressives who don't want to support Marianne Williamson for a number of issues, including her foreign policy positions, her position on Israel, Palestine, her position on the Ukraine war. And I completely understand that approach. But there's this kind of strategic question that I've been wrestling with, which is that in a Democratic primary, this is not a general election where I think that people should vote. But in a Democratic primary, if people were like, oh, Marianne Williamson, she's not going to win anyway, yada, yada. Okay. Well, when it comes down to Biden and DeSantis or Biden and Trump or Biden and Nikki Haley, you can still vote for Biden. What is gained by, and I asked this of a lot of progressives that listen to my show and stuff, what is gained by either, kind of sitting out the primary or premature, I would argue, I'm trying not to, premature is obviously a value-laden word, but, before it is necessary to affect the general election outcome, endorse Joe Biden.
For me, what is gained by not participating in the primary is the fact that I'm not participating in supporting these two corporate parties. That's what it is for me. I'm putting my effort and energies into other projects like Workers Strike Back, into mutual aid, into direct action, things that I've actually seen help people in the community. That's what it is for me. And the reality is, for a lot of people who are solely focused on electoral politics through the national electoral politics, they get to a point where they believe that by voting, they are actually going to change people's lives. Like, people's lives are going to change for the better. And during my lifetime, I have not seen that to be true. And I think the thing is, like I told you, these parties support corporate interests. They pass legislation that backs corporate interests. They rarely pass legislation that benefits the people that doesn't have some type of corporate interest attached to it, unless they are pushed to do so. So for me, there's no reason for me to support or participate in the primary, because I see it as though you're still a candidate running in a corporate system, and you're still allowing yourself to go into those corporate parties. So for me, instead of spending my time and donating money, I will never donate money to these politicians again. Bernie Sanders owes me a huge refund. AOC owes me a refund. I would never give them money again. I would put my money into mutual aid efforts. I would put my money into something that's actually helping people in the community. The more time you're spending on supporting those candidates and giving money to those candidates, the less time you are spending supporting organizations like Workers Strike Back, which I was just at, by the way. This Saturday, I was just at the Boston launch. The less time you're focused on labor, supporting these labor movements, the less time you're focused on something like supporting worker co-ops, the less time you're focused on some type of mutual aid or direct action efforts. And that's the thing. The movements on the outside are strong when the people that are involved are fully invested in them. The movements on the outside are not strong when the people are not fully invested and the people still believe that there is a hero politically that is going to save them. So for me, it's a waste of my time to support anybody that's running those two-party systems, whether it's a primary or not. I just don't have time for it. Bernie owed me some money.
I think that President Biden has worked effectively to move progressive policy, and I'd like him to continue to do that as opposed to move to the moderate lane. I mean, his allies, more of us in the Progressive Caucus have defended him than moderates. I defended him on Afghanistan. He got a lot of criticism on that from the moderate wing. We defended him on going big on Build Back Better. We insisted that we do the Inflation Reduction Act for climate. He took our side on the student loan debate, not the moderate wing. So, I want him to continue to move in a progressive direction. And I believe he's been effective on a number of these policies, which is why I'm endorsing him. I mean, I went very early for Bernie Sanders. Now, are there areas where I policy-wise disagree with him? Yes, and I've been candid with that on Medicare for all, most probably on a $15 wage, on universal child care. What he's proposed isn't universal child care. I call for $10.
But see, this is what I was saying about Ro Khanna. This is what he does. Are there areas where I disagree with him? Absolutely. But you're still not supporting the people who agree with you on most of the policy. See, this is the thing. You're willing to support the person who you agree the least with instead of supporting the person you agree with the most. That's the part. That's the kicker right there. Ro trying to run
$1 a day childcare. And I'll continue to speak out about those policies. I think climate, we have to go much bigger. I'm on the Thrive Act, $1 trillion a year. We did $300 billion over 10 years. I'm for defense budget cuts, by the way. He's coming out with a defense budget that's almost going to be $890 billion.
Yes, so, after audits show that they can't find 30% of what they've been spending anyway.
So I think if people look at my record, they'll see that I took to the New York Times to criticize some of the approach on inflation. I have not shied away from being critical of the president where I disagree. But overall, I think it has been a successful presidency in the light of the circumstances. And I think we can get more progress to usher in a progressive era for 2028 with him there. And that's the.
See, notice he said 2028 again. He's giving you guys The cues. Ro Khanna letting you know, maybe I might be one of those people that run in 2028. He played two lanes. He played both sides for me. I not, like I said, I talked to him. I'll show you what he said to me about third parties. I talked to him. He said some things about third parties, about Jill Stein that I was not cool with. I don't think, like I said, even if I did invite him back, I don't think Ro Khanna will come back. I don't think so. But I'll go ahead and share it here. I just want to play that one piece where he talked about Jill Stein. That's towards the end. See, I remember where it's at because we got to that towards the end. And then he said he had to go. He got mad. Hold on. Let me see if this is the one. Who is not going to get us into these wars, and someone who really was going to get in there and fight. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama. And that's the one. That's the part. Okay. I went right to it. That's the part when we bring up Jill Stein. I think it's right here. Let me put up the captions. That'll help. Okay.
Union laws. It got us the Affordable Care Act. It stood up for women's rights. So I think that there's a lot that the Democratic Party has achieved. Now, we, in my view, ought to be making the Democratic Party a progressive party, a populist party, a party that's going to stand for bold policy. But it would be wrong to give up on a party that has achieved so much. Now, if there is an independent grassroots candidate who is standing for bold progressive policies, fine. But usually the independent third-party candidates tend to be billionaires or celebrities. And it's not clear to me that those policies that they're going to advocate are going to be Medicare for all or free public college or the progressive policies that many people, your listeners, care about.
He's a damn lie because he knows damn well that Jill Stein also ran on those same policies. Do you see how but this, okay, let me go on. Let me show you what he says. Well, I happen to know one here locally pretty well who was grassroots third-party candidate, and that was Dr. Jill Stein. And when she ran, we were guilt-tripped to vote for Hillary Clinton. That if we didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, then Trump would win. But I still say to this day that Jill Stein was the better candidate.
Well, I supported Hillary Clinton in the general election, and I'm proud of supporting Hillary Clinton. I think that...
Pause. So you see what he did then is the same thing he's doing now. So him and Jill Stein agreed on most of the policies, most of the issues. They agreed on Medicare for all. They agreed on canceling student loan debt. And by the way, that came from Jill Stein, not from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Jill Stein was the first person that I saw actually talk about canceling student loan debt. So let's just keep that in mind, keep that into perspective. But then he goes on to say, well, I supported Hillary Clinton. I stood by Hillary Clinton. So once again, that was Ro Khanna supporting someone who didn't agree with him on most of the policies instead of supporting the person who did agree with him on most of the policies. Now, one can argue he wanted to support the Democratic Party because he is a Democrat, and that's why he didn't support Jill Stein. But what's his excuse now? Because right now, I mean, Marianne Williamson is a Democrat, no? And Joe Biden is a Democrat. So what's his excuse now for supporting someone whose policies he don't align with, or most of the policies, instead of supporting the person that he does align with most of the policies?
Trump was such a threat to democracy and is such a threat to democracy. Look, if Hillary Clinton had won, we would not have had Roe versus Wade overturned. So I do not agree with people who supported Jill Stein, especially in swing states, because the costing of Hillary Clinton that election really led to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court that we currently have.
Well, I would say that Hillary Clinton's campaign cost her the election herself. I feel like that was her doing. Ignoring the Rust Belt, I think, was a totally awful idea. You cannot avoid the Rust Belt. She should have learned that from Bill Clinton. He knew to campaign there. I would also add that having a running mate who was anti-choice. Tim Kaine was not pro-choice when it came to abortion, was also not a good idea. And I also think that Hillary Clinton did not talk to the everyday average person. She was talking at people instead of talking to them. And she's corporate. So for me, I was looking for someone who's grassroots, someone who actually cares about the people, someone who is not going to get us into these never-ending wars, and someone who really was going to get in there and fight. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama, and people wanted something different. So I don't blame someone like Jill Stein. I blame Barack Obama. I think he's the one that actually gave us Trump in the first place, because he made all these promises and he didn't fulfill them. Ro Khanna was willing to back the corporate candidate. And this is why I say, like, the whole like progressive movement, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. How you choose, make this make sense to me. How you go with Hillary?
I have a lot of admiration for President Obama. I think he had to overcome so much, especially as the first Black president, and he had significant achievements with the Dodd-Frank bill, with rescuing us. People forget what the economy was like back in 2008, the hand he was dealt with getting the Affordable Care Act.
So anyway, you get the point. We ain't got to go through all of this. But the thing is this, at the end of the day, Ro Khanna also is backing the establishment candidate. I couldn't believe that. Like, try to use that line on me. I blame Jill Stein for the reason that Hillary Clinton lost. Who did he think he was talking to? Aye. We have an announcement. I want to make sure I don't forget the announcement. I can't. So you guys see the point that I'm trying to make is that he's doing it again. He's doing the same thing. Watch him run in 2028. Watch. And he'll still tell you he's progressive and he supports Medicare for all. Give me a break. Give me a break. Thank you, Matthias. Again, with the voter shaming, these clowns will never learn. Right? I said Ro Con man for court jester. All right. It's Brent said that voice cracking says more than the BS. I don't know. But I do have good news. I'm going to go ahead and shout this out. I have a surprise guest Thursday evening. I'm going to be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time instead of 8. Do you want to guess who it could be? I should have made a poll for this. I did a poll for this one time before, but we ain't got time for all that. I'll just get right to it. So Thursday's special guest is all right. Join me this Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Matt Taibbi will be here. I'm excited to talk to him. I've been covering the Twitter files for quite some time, obviously, as you guys know. So it'd be interesting to talk to him post hearing, because this is after the subcommittee hearing. So I want to talk to him about that. I also want to talk to him. There's a couple of details I want to talk to him about with the Twitter files in particular. And I also want to talk to him about, where he thinks the future of journalism, at least independent journalism, is going to go. I want to talk to him more about censorship as well, his experience in all of this. And also, considering that Matt Taibbi is also from Massachusetts, I want to get his opinion about local politics as well, what he thinks about like organizing on the local level and getting things done statewide. So yes, definitely looking forward to that. So don't miss that, guys. I'll be starting at 7 p.m. this Thursday. So join me for that. Super pumped, super pumped. Let me get to some of the comments here. I don't want to forget you guys. Thank you for the super chat. Eric, Rokon artist is delusional. I'm going to be nice. Historic teaching. Sanders and the fraud squad are in on the grift. Don't talk about them as if they were ever internal opposition. 100% corrupt cowards. Thank you for that super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Andre, or super sticker, Andre. What's up? Thank you, Andre. Wary says, is this your first time speaking with Taibbi? Yes, this will be my first time. The Oracle, my question is, how does his politics demonstrate a fight for what he says he believes in? Well, he did just vote to denounce socialism. So that's why I said, I just don't know. People asked me to bring Ro Khanna back on, and I was like, why? I think he showed you who he was. I don't know, man. I'm not feeling it. The Oracle also says he is about as progressive as a bowl of quick drying cement. Screw Google. Funny, they never see the opportunities until after the window is closed. Then they see it clearly. Well said there. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me tonight. I think we've had a fun time. Yay? A? I said A. You know. I remember the first time I went to Canada and I heard someone say A. They're like, "You're not from these parts, eh?" And I was like, "Oh, Canadians really do say A." I remember that. Anywho, guys, I hope you have a good night. I'm off tomorrow, so I won't be here, but I'll be back Thursday. I'll upload clips tomorrow. You guys know how I do that stuff. So, but yeah. Wow, a lot of you are still sticking around. That's really interesting. Usually people head out when I say I have an announcement. Sign that petition if you can, guys. And it would be also great if we could hook up with other organizers to protest against this this Willow project, because like I said, that's going to affect all of us, you know, not just them. Marco, keep up the fight, eh? Yeah. I'm actually, someone said call in. I'm actually not doing call in tonight because I did it Sunday night. I am going to do it Thursday night. I figured you guys probably would want to call in after the interview with Matt anyway, instead of tonight. But not tonight, Jonathan. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I did it Sunday night, but maybe next week I'll be back on my regular call-in schedule. But I will do call-in Thursday night. So I heard the Oracle. Yeah. Boy, I tell you. All right, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.